participation policy, BEDJA. Public participation is possible via the Zoom link or call-in phone number. Our school committee meetings are also live streamed on YouTube, although public participation is not possible with that option. The link, phone number, and YouTube channel are found at the bottom of the posted agenda on the abschools.org calendar. This meeting is also being recorded and will be posted on Acton TV's website at actontv.org. Per our remote policy, all votes will be done by roll call. I will call each member's name and they will state how they vote. If you want to ask a question or need something or need to contribute something, please use the raise your hand feature rather than physically raising your hand. It's easier for me and Peter to keep track of that. And we will stick to what we've been doing, which is you can ask one question and then it'll give everybody a chance to ask, and I will come back to you if we have additional time. We have a bunch of votes and things on our agenda tonight, so being succinct will be important. The annual spring town elections have fluctuated, so please check our two towns' websites for the most up-to-date information about the elections and annual town meetings. At the moment, both Acton and Boxborough's elections have been postponed to June 2nd to coincide with the state election. Boxborough annual town meeting will be June 15th, and Acton's new date has not been confirmed yet. Now is the part of our agenda for public participation. The public may participate and be recognized to speak by utilizing the raise hand feature through the Zoom online platform or by dialing *9 from the call-in number. Per policy BEDH, members of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes on items not included on this agenda. Comments regarding items on the agenda should be made during that part of the meeting. Typically, the committee administration will not respond to comments during public participation. Is there anyone that would like to speak? I do not see any hands raised. Nope. Are our high school reps here tonight? Do you see them on there, Peter?
I don't know, because not everyone used their last name as well. So what I would say is if one of our high school reps is here, if you could please use the raise your hand feature, that will let us know you want to speak. And I don't see anyone raising their hand.
Great. Okay. Well, then that brings us to Peter and our school closure update.
All right. So this is not as much of a presentation tonight as what you may have become accustomed to, but I do want to just offer, a few brief updates. We left this not necessarily as a superintendent update, but put it as a presentation just because we thought school closure was significant enough to warrant its own regular spot on the agenda. A few different things, one, we are now in our second week of implementing distance learning plans. We want to let everyone know, and I shared this with families last night, that we are in the process of developing a survey that we will be sending out at the end of next week to all of our families to be able to solicit a little feedback on our distance learning and to understand how students might be taking our distance learning as well. So please stay tuned for that, but we are interested in hearing from people. I'll also let everyone know we are finalizing a survey to check in one more time on any family needs that may be arising at this difficult time. This includes, access to technology, access to food, access to medical and mental health services, and also access to, other social support services that families may need in this time, along with providing some opportunities to be able to follow up with individuals who complete that survey and connect them with the resources that they may need. So we're hoping to have that out tomorrow. If not, it'll be first thing next week. And the distance learning survey will be the end of next week. In terms of standardized testing, a couple of important updates for you. One, MCAS has officially been canceled now for all grades. So there was no statewide standardized testing this year. They have not released any other information about how the current 10th graders may be tested in terms of next year or what that looks like going forward. Similar, we do not have information on how our biology students, current 9th grade students, the state plans to assess that group of students. So we're hoping to receive some more guidance over the next few weeks, and we will certainly keep the community and you updated around that. College Board updates. The AP, I've shared this before, but I think it's important information. For AP students, content is limited to what was covered by early March, and the College Board is currently planning for home-based testing this spring for AP tests. SAT dates now through the end of the year, I believe, have been canceled. We are hearing that the College Board is also starting to plan for some home-based testing, either later this spring or even into the fall, depending on how closures go. Larry Dory and I have also started planning for end of the year activities. His team has been assembled and they're taking particular care around our current seniors, knowing that this is a time of year that, you know, seniors have been looking forward to for multiple years of their school careers, and it's that culminating moment for them. He is planning to be sending out a little bit of information to families shortly about some of the plans he has, but we are working very diligently as a district, and I know the high school has been thinking about this quite a bit, of making sure that all of the end of the year activities feel special for that group of students leaving. When will we return, I think, is another important update, and unfortunately we still don't know. I think that our official return date of May 4th is likely in jeopardy at this point based on what we're seeing as the trajectory of the virus. We have not, however, received any additional guidance from the state about what an extension of the closure might look like. We are hoping and possibly anticipating some more information coming out next week from the governor's office, and we're eagerly awaiting that. We are also starting to think about what might happen when we return, even though we don't know our return date. We are starting some conversations with our leadership team, and right now we're in the process of looking at some of the guidance coming from our own state and other states. Right now, California seems to be leading the way on that, and we have started to look at that guidance. We intend to survey our community through the process about concerns that our families may have around the reopening of our schools. And we're hoping to have that survey out in the next couple of weeks. We're trying not to send all our surveys at one time or make surveys long and burdensome for families, because I know everyone's time is precious. So we're staggering these, but I hope to have that survey out around initial feedback on reopening from community in the next few weeks. And I also anticipate that the school committee will need to be involved in some aspects of that planning, because I think our reentry plan will all have, you know, budget and policy implications. I also will share our work that our leadership is doing to make progress on our reentry plan along the way, to make sure that you're informed of our work and have an opportunity to discuss that with us. And then finally, you know, we are anticipating that we will be making revisions to the FY21 budget based on changing revenue forecasts at the state level. We are anticipating reductions in state aid based on Monday's economic forum. However, we also know that there is a possibility of additional stimulus money coming from the federal government. So right now, we don't have a lot of information on that, but it's something that we're going to be monitoring. We're starting to discuss our options, but I think the important thing is that we need a little bit more information to become available around local revenue forecasts before we make any large decisions around budget. But I did want to let you know that we're starting to discuss FY21 budget implications as well. So that is the extent of my update for tonight, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments on that.
And it's a good time to ask questions because we have 15 minutes before we can start the next part of the meeting. So if you have a question for Peter around this, now would be the time to ask. It looks like John is raising his hand.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about in budget subcommittee was the ALG process, and you mentioned that you were going to be talking to John Mangiarotti. I was wondering if you could share some of that conversation and, you know, how things look on the town side and whether there is some consensus that there's merit in getting the ALG back together before we get to town meeting.
Yeah, no, thanks, John. John Mangiarotti and I did have a conversation, and I anticipate that we will be gathering ALG at some point in the future. I think the town is in the same place we are, where they don't have precise revenue forecasts or exactly know what's happening at the state level. So I think we're all a little bit waiting to see what's coming, but, you know, trying to do some due diligence to planning for that.
Angie?
Yeah. So does that mean we will revise what's proposed before the town meeting?
Yeah, I'm anticipating that we will be revising our budget before town meeting takes place. The way the budget process works, if we were to try to increase our budget prior to town meeting, then we would have a number of due dates that have to take place along the way. There is no hard and fast due date, though, for budget revisions that decrease the budget. And I'm not anticipating anything coming out of our district that would increase the budget. At this time, I think it's likely we're going to be decreasing the budget.
Sorry.
So, Tessa, the times on there are general guides. They're not hard and fast rules.
Sure. Well,
If you had an executive session, it is also possible that you may want to, because the public hearing is a timed issue, you may want to take something else out of order.
Right. That's what Beth just texted me. So
Okay.
I will. So the next thing, so you tell me. The next two things are big. So the budget update from Dave would be after the school choice part of the meeting, and then policy subcommittee.
I think 4.5
And then, okay,
might be a good
Yeah.
candidate.
sure. Okay. So item 4.5 is a recommendation to approve the memorandum of agreement regarding distance learning due to COVID-19 with the Acton-Boxborough Education Association. Do we need to have any additional? Marie is listed as the person on here that would be presenting, but I don't.
Let me see if I can pull Marie in. I know she's
I'll
here.
move to approve.
Let's, I'm just looking for Marie's name in the attendee list. I apologize. Here she is. And she should be coming in momentarily. There she is. Sorry, Marie, it took me a minute to get you into the meeting.
No problem. Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Can you hear me? Yes.
yes.
Yep.
So in your packet, you have the memo of agreement with the Acton-Boxborough Education Association. Because we had such a change in working conditions by moving to distance learning, we negotiated the details of that as they relate to the contract with the Teachers Association. Tessa represented the school committee in that process. And the details are there. It really put students in the forefront and enabled teachers to be available to provide live instruction through synchronous learning as well as asynchronous learning. We talked about spring stipends. So for events that are not going to happen because we're out of school, or while we're out of school, we will not be providing stipends. If we were to go back to school, we would prorate stipends for activities that might be able to be reinstated. And if it's a spring activity that is not happening, but a significant amount of work had been done in preparation, then 25% of the stipend would be provided. And the rest of the details, you can go through them if anyone has any questions, but we would ask the committee to vote it. And I should say the committee did review this in executive session and had an opportunity to weigh in, as well as Tessa being at the table.
So Diane, did you have a question? I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just wanted some clarification on item number 16 on the MOU on stipends for developing online curriculum. I just think it would be helpful to know like what kind of work has been involved in translating classroom curricula to a remote format and why that's being stipended.
You want me to pull Deb into the meeting, Marie, and she can talk to that?
Sure.
Hi,
Go
everyone.
ahead.
Hi, Deb.
Hi, how are you? Hi, so we put together distance learning planning teams at each grade level. It includes 2 classroom representatives, along with an ELE educator, an English language educator, a special educator, and a reading specialist, along with some of our coordinators for each of those grade levels. And so what they're doing is they're looking through all of the different skills and the different concepts that we want to deepen, and things that we may not be able to get to this year that we may need to think about how we're going to plan for next year. And what they're doing is they're creating lessons and activities that students can do at home for each of the different subject areas by grade level, and thinking about it through a universally designed learning lens so that it's as accessible for all students as possible. They do that each day. So they're meeting each day, Monday through Thursday, with their colleagues to do that work. And on Friday, they're responsible for sharing it with their entire district-wide grade level so that there's an understanding of all the activities that are on the learning board going forward. And so that parents then can also understand what it is that they'll be doing with their students. So the work starts on Monday, it ends on Thursday, and on Friday they have meetings with their colleagues.
I appreciate you shedding some light on that. The scope of this is just immense. So we appreciate all the work that everybody's doing to make sure that students have work that is enriching at home.
Okay. Paul, were you raising your hand to move the thing, or do you have a question?
I have a question.
Okay.
When I saw this in the packet, it looked awful lot, just like what we had looked at in executive session, and I saw the signatures. So I just scanned it. It looks a lot like what we've seen before. But what I really need to make sure I understand, there are no changes since the last time we saw it. Is that right?
Correct, Paul. There are no changes. So the process for a negotiated contract is that it's presented to the school committee in executive session. There's a vote there, which you took, and then it's brought forward to the public, and then there's a vote in the public. So it's the same exact document.
Michael?
Yes, I have a question for school choice. What I understand is that there's only one student who has sibling this year, right? Needs to be.
We're not on that part of the agenda yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Angie? Did you have a question? You're muted.
Yeah, okay. This is also clarification. So this one will be ended by the end of June. And if we were going into the 112 budget and this will be going, and I'm trying to figure out what will be based on if we will be going beyond June 30th.
So Angie, if distance learning were to need to continue after June 30th, we would probably go back to the union and see if there are any changes to make, or if this being extended would make sense. It wouldn't apply in the summer. This is for the school year teachers. But if it were to go into, if something were to happen next year, we would go back and talk to the teachers again.
But the one that we're voting today is June 30th.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Or until we return to school, whichever happens first.
Oh, okay, thank you.
John?
I wanted to comment, as I did in executive session, that I thought this was a very impressive document, representing as it did, all of the work, first of all, to develop the plan. And then secondly, the work, from Tessa and Marie and Mike and Mark to come to an agreement. So I'm very appreciative of this work. And at least, my understanding is, if I look at how we're doing as compared to other districts, obviously we wish we were doing better, but compared to a lot of the rest of the world, we're doing great. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Angie, did you have another question? Oh, Adam.
I'd like to move to approve the letter.
Second.
Okay, so is there any additional discussion? No. Okay, so I will do a roll call vote. Adam,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Ginny,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Nora,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
and myself. Yes. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you to everyone who put all the work into obtaining that MOU and to all the teachers who are carrying it out. Is it 7:30 yet? No, it's 7:25.
How about minutes?
Yep, that's what I was just gonna do. So there are minutes in your packet from April 2nd and April 9th. So I will either entertain a motion to approve or anybody has anything that they need to add to those.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, and we will do, is there any discussion? I don't see anybody raising their hands. Okay, then we will do a roll call vote. Adam,
Yes.
do we need to approve them individually? No? Okay. John,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nora,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Ginny,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Those are approved unanimously from both the April 2nd and April 9th meeting. Now it's 7:26. It took almost 1 minute. Who planned the timing on this agenda?
Sorry, it's the fastest some of these updates have gone in a while.
If you have 4 minutes, you can enjoy the creativity that I think some of our students are displaying in our Q&A there. If anyone wants to look at that. Sorry, guys. 7:27. See, Adam, we're gonna go really fast. We're gonna be ahead of schedule.
So in the meantime, I've planned a poem that I could read to the committee. An ode to
Did you
downtime.
clear it with John first?
What's that?
Did you clear it with John first?
John is going to be singing in the background.
Okay.
Well, Cheryl has been doing, Zoom guitar lessons. So, she can strum, I can sing. It's all a good thing.
That's
You can
impressive.
strum. I'm not sure you can.
I could sing the engineer's song.
Please do.
Oh, we're not supposed to egg him on or encourage him in any way.
So are we waiting for a poem?
Peter said he was gonna.
There's not a lot of poetry coming out here.
Tessa, I'll just take a minute to just remind people and remind the public that if you go on and please from Acton, if you go on the Acton Town website, you can download an application to get a mail-in ballot for the June election. And if you mail that in, they'll mail it to you, and then you don't have to go in. They're getting like 50 a day. Quite a few people have done it, and they're recommending that everyone who can go that way, so we eliminate the crowds.
Boxborough is as well. That encouragement came
They are
at
too.
BLF the other night too. So
Okay.
also available.
And I'll also note that by way of, anecdotal evidence, when I shopped at Roach Brothers this week, I didn't see a single person without a mask, which I found stunning. And Andrew Cuomo actually, commented that, the things that he puts out as policies, don't have effect unless people actually say, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. And I think the community should be very pleased, if I look at the range of things that are going on in terms of behaviors, in terms of people working with each other. We're doing, well in an extremely challenging circumstance.
I would agree.
I read an article in the Globe that talked about why Germany has a better success. And it's one is the thinking was that one was that the government makes rational decisions, and the other is that the people follow the direction of the government and they trust the government.
Interesting. All right. Noting
Yeah,
the
but I'm going to
time.
send you back to being a spectator for a little bit.
All right. I now call the FY21 school choice program public hearing to order. Marie?
Okay, so we have been phasing out of school choice for many years, and the memo in your packet shows you that we have a total of 28 current students. 6 are at the high school, although 4 of those are graduating. 8 are at the junior high. 4 are at Blanchard, for a total of 28. So for many years, at least since we regionalized in 2014, the school committee has voted to stay in the school choice program, but only to open up enough seats to accommodate siblings of current choice students so that we can keep those families together. If you basically determine whether to be in the program, and if so, how many seats to make available for new students. Once you do that, siblings have a priority to any open seats. So of our current 28 choice students, there is 1 sibling who would be entering kindergarten next year. And so the recommendation would be that you vote to continue in the school choice program and limit the openings to 1 seat in kindergarten for the 2020-2021 school year. We've been phasing out of the program because of class size and space concerns. Someday in the future, you may decide to add kids back based on wherever things are at that point in time. The elementary kids that have come through the choice program have come through Blanchard. You're well aware of our concerns about class size and space at Blanchard. I think this is the last sibling. So next year we may be asking you to actually withdraw from the school choice program, but we will verify that between now and then. But for now, we're asking you to vote to continue and to open up 1 seat in kindergarten.
So Marie, I know that Angie noted in an email that those numbers do not add up to 28.
Well, that's a problem. Okay, I will look it up. Shoot. Yeah, I think the high school is higher. I must have picked 1 grade.
I would think, given how long that Blanchard had school choice, that would make sense to me that it was higher than that, but those numbers by themselves don't add up to 28. So I guess we should just check.
It'll take me just a minute. You can go on if there are any other questions or
There are.
conversation.
Michael, did you want to ask a question?
Oh, yeah. Regarding the kindergarten and elementary school, how many siblings we will get seat this year? I mean, the next 2021. You are saying that this is the last season, right?
1.
1, right?
Yes.
Only 1. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Nora?
So I wasn't here for the prior discussions about participating in school choice and then the decision not to participate in school choice. And so I'm curious about, when building the new school and when we have more space sort of on the horizon, if we're still thinking about leaving school choice. And part of why I'm wondering about this is I know that we don't participate in the METCO program. And I'm also wondering if historically people who participated in school choice, did that sort of serve to help students from sort of less advantaged communities come to our school district, or did it not really meet that need?
1 second. Good question, Nora. Sorry, it's hard to see. So choice, we have 4 elementary, 8 at the junior high. So it's 18, not 28. So we only have 18. So the 3 numbers are correct, 4, 8, and 6, but the total should say 18. Does that make more sense?
Mhm.
Okay. So when we've had school choice, most of our school choice students come from Littleton and Maynard. We've had a few from some other communities a little further away, but mostly Littleton and Maynard. I don't have demographic information about the students that we've had over time. When the region and Acton Public stopped taking school choice, I think I said 13 years ago. It may have been longer. It's been many, many years. Again, because of class size and crowding. Boxborough Public Schools started taking choice a lot. And it filled classes and allowed keeping 3 sections instead of 2 sections and that kind of thing. Ever since we regionalized, we stopped taking more. Again, we've really filled all our classrooms with the kids that live in Acton and Boxborough, and the class sizes are still not totally where we'd like them to be in all cases. We designed the new building for the number of kids we expect to have in Acton and Boxborough, so not really with room for school choice, but that could happen, particularly if we have financial issues and we have some space. The committee gets to decide every year. And when we take school choice students, we get $5,000 per student through the Chapter 70 program. Now we know our first pupil costs are closer to 15,000. So you kind of balance that. The incremental cost for 5 more kids isn't necessarily 15 times 5, but so you have to weigh a lot of factors. It could help increase diversity. The METCO program could help increase diversity. And those are things I think we would want you to consider going into the future if we were to be in a position where we felt like we had space in classrooms.
Thank you.
Sure.
John,
I move that the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee continues the school choice program and limits openings to 1 seat in kindergarten for the 2020-2021 school year.
so actually, John, I'm going to ask you to hold that for a second, because what we have to do once we're done with the questions is we have to adjourn the public hearing and then do the proposed motion. Sorry, you phrased it so beautifully also. You did a nice job. But I will let you do it once we're back in the public meeting. But first we need to adjourn the public hearing if there's no other questions from committee members. And I don't see any questions from the public. All right. So John, would you like to move us to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn the public hearing.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote. Adam,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes. Yes.
John,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Denny,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Nora,
Yes.
and Paul,
Yep.
and myself. Yes. Okay. So now on page 4 of your packet is the approved motion. John, would you like to read it?
Yeah, what I'm going to say is just slightly different. I move that the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee continues the school choice program and limits openings to 1 seat in kindergarten for the 2020-2021 school year.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Now we'll do a roll call vote again. Adam,
Yes.
Angie. You're
Sorry.
muted.
Yes. You're muted.
Amy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Jenny,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Nora,
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Yes. Me. Yeah. Okay, great. That passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. So I think, without skipping anything, that we're on 4.3, right, Peter? The budget update from Dave?
That is correct. We're back there. So I'm going to bring him into the meeting. And he should be joining us momentarily.
Hi there.
Hey, Dave.
Good evening. All set?
Yep.
Okay. This is a preliminary look at fiscal 20's financial status. It's still a work in process and ongoing as a daily effort. I do expect a formal, detailed third quarter report at your next meeting. But I wanted to give you some things that we know and are working on, essentially a preview of what you might expect in the third quarter report. If I can have the screen at one point during this, I'll walk you through. Actually, if I could have the screen now, what I'd like to do is to walk you through a narrative. I think it would be more helpful for you to read the words that I've written down as I narrate the key points. I'm not going to read it for you. I have an overview that I'll narrate as we walk through the memo. It's like 4 pages long.
Hey, Dave, you can share your screen now.
Okay. Now hold your breath. I just have to find it. I think it's this. It is. Okay. So I'll scroll down as we go through some of the points here. So third quarter budget update, we'll start with revenues. You can see there's not a lot to talk about here, but there are a couple of important things. We're looking into Medicaid reimbursement. The reimbursement numbers are down, apparently with the result of changes in the administrative claim process. We're working with our collaborative who administers the program for us to get a handle on this. And we may have to reduce the projected revenue forecast. As of the second quarter report, I projected a $50,000 surplus over a budget of $200,000. Number two, investment income is up. I had projected the last quarter when the treasurer sent me an email. Investment income is up. I'm sorry. As for a change, I've written this down and I'm not going off the top of my head, and so I just have to read. I projected last quarter that investment income would be up. And so when we got the number this month, when the treasurer sent me this month's interest income for deposit, she added the comment, it's quite good to have $82 million in the bank. Of course, the current thought is for the income attributable to the Douglas Gates bond, so 75 million of that would be set aside at the end of each year and transferred to the Capital Stabilization Fund, where it could be used to cover contingency costs for the project. And Chapter 78 is not likely to be touched based on what I've been hearing. That's for FY20. I do think it's possible for the final payments of circuit breaker and transportation aid. They're typically made in June, and thereafter most of the dust has settled with the state's economy. And typically there's a bump at the end of the year in both of those programs. I think given where the state's going, where the state knows it's going, those numbers will probably be pretty flat throughout the rest of this year. So in summary, in my summary below, I'm not assuming any material revenue surplus in FY20. That position might change depending upon the response we get regarding Medicaid reimbursement when I do a full third quarter presentation at the next meeting on May 7th. I can go on or take questions on this aspect.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Expenditures. My team is working with all of the department's admins to review all of the purchase orders that had been entered into the system before the shutdown, including such things as blanket orders. So for example, a $2,000 open order for copy paper, Estimates, for example, the remainder of an open order that was partially used but now can be closed. Contractual arrangements such as custodial uniform cleaning.
Excuse me, Dave.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just so the committee can follow along, do you want to scroll down a little bit on your screen?
Yes, I can walk and chew gum. Yes, thank you for that.
Sure.
Thank you.
My apologies. I'll get the hang of this. So I talked about some of the reasons for purchase order closings, and special ed tuitions is the last one. I'll talk specifically about that. Our goal is to get the projection model that we use to reflect a revised estimate of year-end costs for all departments under the assumption that we don't return to school. I can share some preview numbers for the major expense categories. So these are A through G on the bullets that you see. Building and academic departments, we expect there'll be a significant surplus because classroom needs are essentially nil. Purchases, including additional technology licenses like Zoom, Chromebooks, etc., are being approved at the district level at this point. The year-end budget projection for personnel costs has done a 180 since the second quarter financial report. HR and Finance did a budget reconciliation earlier this week, and I have a summary of where the projection stands, which I will try to access now. It should be here. The numbers are a little small, but it just fits on one screen. And so what you can see is where the personnel projection stood in January. So 3 months ago, we were projecting about a $300,000 deficit in all of the personnel line items. And what's hot off the press completed this week is we're projecting now a surplus of $185,000, a difference of a swing in the variance of almost $500,000. You can read as I continue to talk briefly some of the comments, the reasons for the changes. Some of them are quite obvious. We're not incurring overtime and barely incurring substitute costs. And we've quantified that, and Marie's team and my team got together to do this, and we're very happy with the result of their efforts and think this is a pretty good number. Before, I don't plan on coming back to this page, Tessa, so if there are questions on it specifically, do you want to have them asked now?
Sure. We can't see the number page that you were.
We don't see the Excel sheet.
No.
You don't see the Excel sheet. Okay.
You still see your document with expenditures.
You have to
How about if
scroll down.
let's do this. Peter, if I hit stop share and then share screen again, will it come back?
I don't know. Did you scroll down on your screen?
It's on an Excel spreadsheet. It's not on the Word document. It's on a different. Then
yes.
We'll try that. Let's try it. There it is. Come on. That better?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So, as I was saying, this is where we were in January, about a $300,000 deficit projected. There are the components of the personnel costs. As of now, we're up to almost $200,000 surplus projected. And you can see the major reasons for the changes. We had some unpaid leaves in teacher costs. The spring stipend reductions for coaches is built into there now. The need for substitutes and overtime are both basically eliminated because of the shutdown. And that's offset by an addition for the stipends that were approved for district learning and planning. So that number went the other way. So all told, it swung about $500,000 from negative to positive. So now I'll say, before I leave this one, any questions?
Angie has her hand raised.
Okay.
Angie, go ahead.
Unmute.
Yeah, okay. Can you remind me the last one, the stipend? What's the additional? That's.
I think
what-
that was discussed earlier tonight's meeting. So that was the stipends that were approved for the shutdown related distance learning.
Can you give me one example?
The curriculum teams, Angie, that Deb
Oh,
just
the
described.
curriculum team. Okay, okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. It doesn't look, Dave, like there are any other questions.
Okay, so I'm gonna eliminate that one and I'm gonna grab this one back. Hey, I'm getting the hang of this.
Yeah, you're a pro now, Dave.
Where were we? Okay, we're back to C. Special education. This is a complicated one. And I don't have much in the way of answers here. For most of our non-personnel costs for special ed, including contracted services, transportation, and tuition, we're paying invoices for services through March. For services after that, we're going to be paying our collaboratives. So that would be CASE and all of the collaborative entities that we belong to. We'll continue to pay them, but we're seeking guidance from DESE and frankly, working with other districts to try to determine whether to, and by how much, to negotiate a discount of the cost of services provided during the shutdown. There's going to be more to come on that. There's a lot of traffic on both the special educators, special ed directors, and business managers listservs about working together to try and get a handle on dealing with day schools, residential schools, on a metric, a means of coming to an adjustment, a contractual adjustment for services provided during the shutdown, or frankly not provided, as the case may be. So more is to come on that. I've not seen anything scheduled yet by DESE in the way of another Zoom conference on it, but I have with certainty the knowledge that it's going to happen, and probably within a week or so. If we do experience any significant amount of savings from reducing our FY20 out of district tuition, that would result in reduced circuit breaker reimbursement in FY21, but obviously there'd be a net benefit to the district. If we save on 100% of a cost variance this year and lose 75% of that reimbursement next year, we're still ahead. So I'll take that trade-off anytime. And EDCO is one of the collaboratives for whom we will be continuing to pay our full invoiced cost, but there's a particular aspect that Peter is going to discuss later. We talked about whether we would segue to it now, but Peter's going to bring that up later. On to D. I was going to do this too as we went along. So we're on D. Our review of facilities expenditures is in process. We do expect significant savings in utilities. That's what happens when you don't need to heat and light your buildings for the benefit of occupants. JD and Kate and I agree that we should be able to better quantify the savings once we get invoices for this year's usage in April and compare it with last year. Transportation, same thing. We're going to have reduced operating costs. Buses get great gas mileage when they don't need to run. The same thing applies as for circuit breaker. If we have reduced costs in FY20, the transportation aid is a reimbursement program. We'll have a lower reimbursement in FY21. Again, it's not 100% reimbursement, so the net effect will be positive for the district and will save money in FY20. Health insurance has always been a typical one that is one of the first things we talk about, but this year we're pretty much on target. The difference between a small surplus in retirees and a small overage in active employees pretty much balances, and we shouldn't have anything significant there. So then I went through all of the lines that we know about, and I'll just scroll down. I think I can do this, and you can see some of the, there's a very tiny minus in 3 of those numbers. So they go both ways. Some of them are under budget, some of them are over budget, But those are some other items that don't fall into departmental categories necessarily, but that's where we think they're going to be come the end of the year.
Dave, it looks like Diane has a question. Would now be an appropriate time for her to ask?
Sure.
Diane?
Yeah, so it's more like a comment. I wonder about the collaboratives because, you know, not paying them, I'm wondering if that would essentially, you know, put them out of business. And then in a related, like more of a question, and I think like my first part is more directed at the Board of Selectmen. Are we still paying like Minuteman assessments? So I know that the junior high has, we pay for that. So is that happening or is that not happening?
So the assessments, we've been paying the assessments. We have been making the assessment payments, yes. So number two to your question is yes, we have been making those payments. Number one, if I put a negative word into what I said about collaboratives, I apologize. We are making payments to the collaboratives. The collaboratives are essentially extensions of the the participating members. And so we got very clear guidance from DESE on that districts are paying their collaboratives.
Peter, do you know what's happening with Minuteman at the junior high school, that program, that the part that the district is paying for? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. We've been continuing to pay any of the collaboratives, member programs, things like that, because ultimately all of those programs are an extension of us. Dave, I don't have a sense of the timeline on how we pay Minuteman. My guess is we probably pay that up front to some degree. Do you have a handle on that?
I can quickly tell you, I need about 15 seconds and I'll get it.
I could just add, this is Marie, that the Minuteman teachers are continuing to teach the way our teachers are.
Yeah, I think, the nuance to what Dave talked about, and I've talked to Debbie Dixon about this as well. There are some of our placements for out of district students have done a fantastic job of implementing plans for students. And then there are others who, might be providing, 1 or 2 hours of services total per week in total education services. And so, we're really looking at each out of district placement carefully and reaching out to families and reaching out to the provider to figure out what type of education plan is being provided, and then figuring out what the appropriate payment to that provider would be. But yeah, collaboratives and Minuteman, we're continuing to keep as partners.
Yes, and I believe that the guidance also extended to public schools, of which Minuteman is one, and so we would be making the payments. And I found out in in our records that we have paid the full assessment for this year.
John, do you have a question?
I do, and it's really not a question that I expect to have Dave answer now, but at some point in the future. I noticed that the number here associated with Middlesex County retirement is small. I'm anticipating, however, that Middlesex Retirement County will not experience a good return on their investments. And so at a future discussion with respect to what's going to happen to true up Minuteman, I'd like some ideas about whether, we're going to get a grace period of 3 or 4 or 5 years, or how that's going to work.
All right. Angie?
Yeah, this is also a clarification question. So for all the collaborative extension that we have, is it reviewed on an annual basis? Is like a contract, or I'm just trying to figure out moving forward, what's the process?
I don't know if Peter wants to talk about how many of the collaboratives he sits as our representative on their boards, but collaboratives are, they're participatory arrangements among a number of different districts. And if they have an assessment, it's based on a budget, which is voted on by the particular board and agreed to, and they send out their assessments much in the same way we send our assessment to Acton and Boxborough.
Okay, so it's basically annual base.
Correct.
Okay.
The assessment is determined annually, correct.
Okay.
And then tuition payments are paid along the way. So there's an assessment that the district pays, and in exchange for that, there's a reduced tuition rate when we place students in that collaborative. So typically the assessment piece is paid up front, and then Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe tuitions are generally paid along the way because students can come in and out of placements.
Tuitions are usually done on a monthly basis based on the number of days the kids are in the program.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So-
sounds like good to keep going, Dave.
Okay, so I've gone through all the operating expenditure items. As far as capital expenditures, I'm reviewing that in detail with JD next week. Much may depend on the extent to which projects can proceed before the end of the shutdown. I should have more information available for this at the next meeting. There hasn't been a lot of activity, as you would expect, going on during the last 4 weeks. So in summary for expenses, you can read what I've written there as far as a summary. Right now, if I had to make a prediction, I would say we'd end up turning back about $500,000, 500,000, maybe more. Honestly, the amount of the projection at this moment isn't as important as it is for me stating that the relatively dire projection of a significant deficit in my second quarter report has been reversed. So the irony is, from a financial standpoint, the operating budget, at least in FY20, has benefited. So if we look at the summary as it relates to E&D, I'm showing this slide from my Budget Saturday presentation as a reminder that the district has an enviable financial reserve position. And that's no doubt part of the reason we got such a low interest rate on our bonds. The bond sale, I don't know about anybody else, but it seems to me like that was about 6 months ago now. It was only a month ago. Our FY21 budget calls for use of $1,145,000 worth of E&D. So restoring 500,000 or perhaps more than that will help to bolster the cushion as we head to what's expected to be a difficult year. As I mentioned, while I think we'll be able to avoid any significant negative revolving fund balances, DOR would typically deduct any deficits from its certification of E&D. They might relax the rules this year, but I don't expect either way it would materially impact Acton-Boxborough. And there's the caveat that I just paraphrased. So up next is FY21, and in every DESE Zoom conference that I've participated in, and they average about 2 per week, the answer that we hear most often is stay tuned. I listened to and emailed to members a summary prepared by Julie of Mars, the organization, not the planet, of Tuesday's State House virtual economic conference. There were a lot of predictions, and by no means were they all gloom and doom. But I would caution that an event like this, an economic collapse of this magnitude caused by a non-economic circumstance, is unprecedented, and does anyone really know with certainty what will happen? You can see some of the factors that I put down are unknowns. I do believe the greatest financial risk for FY21 is state aid and presumably Chapter 70. There are so many more unknowns, which I've listed below, some of which I've listed below, that all I can do pretty much is to stay tuned. And so you can see some of them are obvious. Number 4, how will not very well worded there, but how will it play out between the federal and the state and the local levels if there's federal relief? Back in 2009 to 2013, the federal relief was in the form of money under the ARA program, American Recovery and Relief Act, I believe is what it was called. And another program called Ed Jobs after that. And I looked it up, and Acton-Boxborough received $4.3 million in total from those programs over that period of time, out of a total of $944 million allocated to Massachusetts. So far, we know that 200 million has been allocated to Massachusetts. You can do the math. It's not even worth predicting. It's not even worth stating the numbers here. What I do believe would happen is the state would likely cut Chapter 70 aid to all districts using some formula, and then backfill it with some, most, all of similar amount of money it receives from the federal government. That's based on what happened 11 years ago. Presumably, I've heard nobody say anything to the contrary. That would be the method of how it would handle it this time around. And then I've just finished up with what's next, and that's so your next meeting, I intend to have a final Q3 financial report, update the status of revolving funds. There is likely to be more information about shutdown related activities statewide, and whatever comes out, if it's urgent, we'll get that information out obviously as soon as it happens.
Diane?
Dave, are you concerned at all about minimum aid, that we might not get that?
My concern, Diane, is that whatever cut is made, that it will not be restored to 100%. So if it's restored to 99%, I'm not that concerned. And if it's restored to 50%, I'm very concerned. In the era, the district I worked for did very well. It was backfilled significantly by the Chapter 70 cuts. Two things happened. They were backfilled by ARA money, and the ARA money was considered part of the Chapter 70 base going forward. And so I think a lot of districts ended up in a hold harmless situation as a result of the ARA money back then. That's a little off topic. I don't know how. I've talked to one person at DESE, and he makes the assumption that they're going to do it in some kind of across the board Chapter 70 based formula, and that would be the cut, and then the backfill would be presumably a proportionate amount to every district. I'm less concerned, Diane, about, and you'll get this, about minimum aid than I would be if I was in a district that was all geared up to receiving its first year windfall under the SOA. And I have a colleague who I'm very close to who just texted me the other day and said, how am I going from drinking champagne in November to this? Because he's expecting the rug to be pulled out from under the SOA funds that they were expecting.
Thank you.
Dave, another helpful part of the discussion in budget subcommittee in looking back at 2008, 2009 is to talk about, how the timing of the financial crisis back then, relative to the budget cycle differs from the current circumstance. So I was hoping you could, for everybody's benefit, run us through that, and particular talk about what that means for the 1/12 scenario.
So back then, around the middle of the year, the governor proposed what's called a 9C cut, meaning he exercised his authority to reduce the amount of Chapter 70 aid that went to districts. And in Medway's case, it was $370,000. I just know that amount by heart. We got that money back through ARA funding the next year and then some going forward. So as the state made further cuts to Chapter 70, it was backfilled with money received by the federal government through the stimulus program. That's one aspect of John's statement / question. The 1/12 scenario, I should stop there because I'm going to embark on a totally different line of thought. So if there are more questions about federal stimulus, I'm really gonna say nothing much more besides whatever they do is likely to be affected through a cut in Chapter 70. That's the only way they can really affect a cut in their costs to reduce their budget deficit, which could be anywhere between $2 billion and $4 billion from what we heard Tuesday. So they'll affect it via a cut to Chapter 70 and presumably backfill it with federal money given out on a Chapter 70 style allocation. That's what I think is going to happen.
Diana,
So
did you raise your hand again, or did you just not put it down? Okay. She just didn't put it down. So
should I continue with John's question about 1/12?
Yes.
So from a legal standpoint, the school district has passed the budget, but Acton and Boxborough as towns have not passed their budgets, which are needed to form a basis for them paying their assessments. So if they don't pass their budgets before June 30th, the director of the Department of Revenue will take the initiative and authorize cities and towns to have what's called a 1/12 budget, meaning they're authorized to expend 1/12 of their prior year's budget on a legal basis. You cannot overspend your budget, and you cannot spend $1 if there isn't an authorized budget. So if there isn't one by June 30th, the Department of Revenue will act quickly to allow cities and towns to have that authority to spend 1 month's worth of expenditures based on the prior year. To the extent that Acton and Boxborough, we would have to have a discussion with them, because from a cash flow standpoint, they may have other pressing needs than paying their assessment on the 1st of July when they get authority to do so. From our standpoint, we wouldn't be in bad shape because our teacher salaries, even if they're paid over the summer, that's from FY20 funds. So from a cash flow standpoint, our two smallest months of the year are July and August. So we would enter probably with some ability to get by on a 1/12 basis from Acton and Boxborough and let them ease into it as well. Hopefully it doesn't go beyond that length of time, because as soon as budgets are approved, then they're able to pay the entire assessment as it's invoiced.
Okay. So Dave, there's no other questions.
Okay, I'm gonna stop share. There I am. Sorry, John, no meme.
Well, if you break up like Marie does, we're going to give you the max headroom profile picture.
Perfect. All right. So I assume that means that we can move on now. Are you done, Dave, with all of your fabulous information?
Well, I'm done with my information.
All right. So item 4.4 is policy subcommittee. So Amy, do you want to introduce the first read or go right to Deb?
Yeah, so the policy subcommittee met on April the 9th, and we have one policy on for first read, and I'll have Deb talk about it.
We're just waiting for Deb to start her video. There she goes.
Hi. So this is the first read for proposed changes to the Acton-Boxborough Regional School High School graduation requirements. The summary of the proposal is to increase really both the mathematics and the science, technology, and engineering, or the STE requirements, from 2 years to 3 years, and to establish a 2-year world language requirement. The changes are proposed to work towards the following goals the high school set out: to align their current graduation requirements with the actual course study that's really undertaken by about 97% of our student body. It more closely aligns our graduation requirements with the recommendations from the Massachusetts Department of Ed. It ensures that all of our students are held to the same high expectations, and it formally recognizes the importance and benefits of multicultural learning by establishing a world language requirement, graduation requirement. So for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
John?
Yes, thank you. The memo was very nicely constructed to show that what we're talking about, in the case of the most impactful requirement is 2.5% of the student body, which would be about 12 seniors. And so what I was wondering, I certainly understand the argument about holding everybody to the same high standard, but the standard that I would really hope we would aspire to is to provide an appropriate education, which simply has some variability across our student body. So I guess I'm struggling to understand why these 12 students will be better served by dealing with this requirement.
I think there are some exemptions to the world language piece. We also know that for some students that because whether it might be they're learning English might be their second language as they're coming in and not world language, or for some students where language acquisition might be a challenge, that they will not be able to meet those requirements. And so there will be some flexibility and there will be some waivers. One of the goals, in my understanding and talking with the high school administration, is that they will be able, this will also allow for them to create some different kinds of electives for students and some other kinds of variability in terms of choice. So again, making sure that we're meeting individual needs, but also holding students to the same expectation in terms of the graduation requirements for science and mathematics, especially.
If I can comment on that as well, I think, we're not, for some of our students, we're not necessarily finding that students are taking an extra art course or an extra social science course or pursuing some other avenue that they're interested in, because we do provide students an opportunity to have unscheduled periods. Oftentimes our students are just taking additional unscheduled periods. And so it's not necessarily that, we're taking away an opportunity to pursue something that might be a passion for them. It's simply that, we're trying to keep them engaged in a learning process as opposed to just having free time.
Diane?
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. I get what you're saying, John. I just don't think there's anything wrong with encoding, a higher expectation instead of just saying, well, it's common practice. So we don't have to kind of put it down in writing as an expectation. So I like that we're doing this. I took a look at just 1 or 2 other districts and they were much closer to Mass Core than we were. And I'm wondering if Deb, if you looked at, what other districts were doing versus if we were really behind the 8 ball or if we were, just our practices were commensurate with others.
And we certainly did take a look at what other districts are doing. And, again, without stating it explicitly, 97% of our students were already meeting those expectations. It really is putting a stake in the ground to say these things are important. We feel that world language is important. The extra year of math and the extra year of science, just in terms of also what colleges are expecting our students to have in terms of their application. So we just feel like it's a way to hold all of our students to the same expectations, but also to say that these things are important to us, as they already are, as exemplified by the number of courses that our students already take.
I think too, just Diane, to continue on your comments, I think sometimes what we'll see with students is if students' last math course is in their sophomore year of high school or their junior year of high school, and then there's a gap between that and post-secondary work, sometimes that's just not in students' best interest. And I think, we want to kind of keep kids progressing along the curriculum that we know they're going to need for kind of that post-secondary success. And I'm not just talking about, universities, but I think, it's broader than that.
Paul?
So the question I have, I remember voting on this just a few years ago. And I'm curious what's changed? Is it that Mass Corps has kind of stepped it up, or are we just deciding we want to revisit?
I think there's been some conversation about revisiting it for quite a while. The last time we revisited it was to establish a visual arts graduation requirement. Again, noting that almost, I think it was 98% at that point of our students were taking even more than a semester of coursework in the visual arts, and stating how important that was. I think that was a time when the Common Core was coming out and there was a rush around just literacy and math, and it was important for us as a district to say that the arts was a very important component of being an educated person. The world language piece, the seal of biliteracy, I think has been a piece of this as well, really to acknowledge how important it is to be biliterate or multiliterate in our world. And so that, along with looking at graduation requirements, looking at Mass Core, looking at what other districts did, and then really just looking to see what our students are already doing, really does codify what we already have. So I think all those things coming together, Paul, is really what came together and why we're asking for this now.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm a little concerned about the 3% that if we're raising the bar to kind of align where we are organically, I'm not sure there's a problem there that needs to be solved. But what I worry about is that when we raise that bar, the 3%, we're putting pressure on that 3% that may struggle with that bar.
Yeah.
So if we're going to look at Mass Core, what I'd rather we do is look at that third piece, that when they add the civil component to education, I don't see that anywhere. And I think I'd rather see us offer something having to do with living in a civil society than just raising the bar that people are already jumping over.
When you're talking about the civil piece, are you talking about the civics component from the history standards?
Yes, civics. I'm sorry, civics.
Yeah. Yep. So the civics piece is something that already all students will need to be, take part in. That's the civics project component during their high school years, and so that already is established for all graduating seniors. We can certainly take a look. I mean, if there's something very specific you want us to look at in terms of what kinds of process we will have for the handful of students for whom I know that they wrote about a waiver process, but if you want more specifics around that, would that be helpful?
Yeah, I guess I'm getting very protective of those 150, 160 kids. Because right now I'm not inclined to support the change. I remember voting it back in 2015, and I was very happy to see that, the kids who are organically, making, taking the courses, whatever, they're fine. I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the others who might struggle. But with the civics, I worked at a polling station up in Canada years ago, and reported that the turnout was 80%. And I remember my aunt saying that was dismally low. That was 10% lower than what they usually see. And here in the States, it's like we're happy to get 50%. And I really think we need to change that.
Couldn't agree more.
Angie?
Yes, so I'm happy to see this one. My question is, with this change, does that mean we will look at the more choices and flexibilities for student? And because they need to fulfill the graduation requirements now. And in particular that, for example, don't quote me, but I think there's certain courses that cannot be taken at some grade. Will we look at providing more flexibility and more choices for the student because of this change?
I can jump in on that, Deb.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so, I think my
Love that.
vision, and, Deb and I and Larry have talked a lot about this, but I think the long-term vision that we'd like to see is an expansion of the types of opportunities available to students at the high school, and increase the variety of coursework. I think oftentimes we think that if we're going to have a math requirement, it's limited to Algebra 1, geometry, Algebra 2, then pre-calculus, and then maybe calculus. That's a real disservice to what mathematics actually is, and how mathematics is used in the world. I think there's a lot of students that, in addition to maybe a traditional mathematics program, might also benefit from courses in financial literacy. They might benefit from courses in computer programming, or even more application-based classes. And so, the intent of increasing the requirement is not to just put more kids into our pre-calculus and calculus programs long-term. That pathway is not going to be for every student. But instead, the intent is to create this with a couple years of planning ahead, where we can have courses available to students that are real world practical classes in mathematics that they can take, skills and concepts with them the rest of their lives. And it's going to look different for different students. And I think we're really committed to making sure that that happens. But, I definitely think, especially in the sciences and mathematics, we have tremendous opportunity. We have such a rich STEAM culture already embedded in our community. And if we can capitalize on that and increase the variety of programs available to students, I just think that's going to be such a breath for a lot of our students in the high school, and in particular thinking about hands-on opportunities in all these types of courses as well. So, I just want to make sure we're clear that, by looking at graduation requirements, this is not limited to just a traditional mathematics pathway. This is really about increasing flexibility and being more hands-on and engaging for kids in ways that they can use math their whole lives.
One of the examples we have is that this from the STEAM work is a collaborative opportunity between the biology department and the visual arts department. And they are going to be offering a course next year around designing, around problem solving STEAM projects. And so again, that could fulfill an art requirement, that could fulfill part of a science requirement. And it's those kinds of courses that we'd love to develop more of. Peter and I've talked about a forensics course, for example, how exciting that would be for some students. So again, it's the opportunity to increase the kinds of courses that we offer for our students.
John?
Yeah, I think I sort of heard Peter say two different things. One point related to students electing not to take classes, and therefore they just have less structured learning. And I have a lot of sympathy, for the idea that, if we increase the requirements so that they were forced to take more classes and we had an appropriate breadth of offering, we would in fact provide a better service to those students. What I'm still not quite sympathetic to is the idea that by being prescriptive about which of those additional classes they should take, we're really providing a better service to students. Because I can, see that, if somebody took a bunch of extra elective in the arts, but not world language, how can I know that that was a bad choice for that student? And why should I constrain them, away from doing that? And I think the same thing is true if you think about the kinds of math enrichment you were talking about. I'd much rather see it as if you want them to take more courses, fine, let's increase the requirement to take more courses, but let's not prescribe which courses that has to be.
It's interesting you say that, John. One of the when I asked the reasons why not 4 math courses, which is what Mass Core actually requires and what a lot of districts have, the suggestion was that if we had 4, then that would not allow students within the schedule that we have to take art courses, to take the music courses, to take the other kinds of electives that students might want to participate in. And so I think, yeah, it has to be that balance, right? So that there is an opportunity to take, if you want to take more history courses or you want to double up in a certain area that you're passionate about, that you still have that opportunity and that flexibility. But certainly understand your point.
I think I relate it back too. I think, although this year feels like about 4 years packed into one at this point. But I think it was earlier this year, the Boston Globe released the study where they looked at college completion rates on a district by district basis, if I'm not mistaken. Deb, is that this year?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think, one of the things that people will typically look to in terms of college completion, and, mathematics typically is the gateway to a lot of post-secondary access. And so I think that's the reason why you have seen both the state and districts become a bit more prescriptive, that they want students to be continuing with mathematics to the extent possible throughout their high school career, because it really does open up gateways for them after. But, we know every student's a little bit different, but yet, we know also the research tends to show that mathematics is pretty important for that next step.
Paul, are you raising your hand again?
I am, and I appreciate. I needed to hear this because when I read through the packet, what was coming into mind was just, is this decision a district-centric decision? Meaning, are we just doing this so that we can look like other districts, or is this child-centric? And in which case, I'm more willing to listen to it. And I'm hearing more child case-based arguments, so I appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay, so that was a first read, so that'll come back to us. If you have any additional comments or things.
Sure, let us know.
I just want to say thank you, Dr. Bookus.
Thank you, John.
I would also, because I don't find myself on the other side of the table as Deb, and I apologize for the comments.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deb. So item 4.4.2 is a recommendation to waive a portion of student progress reports to parents and guardians, file IKAB. So a 2/3 vote is required per our suspension of policies, file BGF. Amy, did you want to? You're listed on my thing.
Yeah, I can speak to this. At our policy subcommittee meeting on April the 9th, we discussed a possible action outlined in the superintendent's school closure update memo that was part of the school committee meeting on April the 2nd. Due to possible changes to the grading system at the high school as a result of the COVID-19 virus, the possible action stated, quotation, after consulting with our attorney, it is recommended that the school committee consider waiving policy IKAB, student progress reports to parents and guardians, at a future meeting. Members discussed waiving the cooperative study of teachers, principals, parents, and staff before making major changes to the grading system. One member emphasized the importance of community feedback in regard to this. Marie explained to the subcommittee members how many administrators are involved with the superintendent in this current discussion. They considered whether part of the policy should be waived or the whole policy should be revised. And then ultimately our recommendation is this. So there's some language in your packet. What we're asking you to do is to move I'm going to take a look at the original. So move to, I don't know where my mind is, move to waive the sentence, the last paragraph, first sentence. Major changes in the reporting system shall be preceded by a cooperative study and evaluation by teachers, principals, parents, and the superintendent or designee. Full stop there. To waive that portion. And then part of the second part of the motion is just kind of a clear trying to give a clear understanding of what then would happen. Temporary changes to the grading system related to the COVID-19 virus will be made by the principal and the superintendent after consideration of feedback from parents, students, and staff. Such changes will be shared with the school committee and the public, and the waiver will be in effect until June the 30th. So that's where we are, where we're asking today for you all to vote on. One thing that also, I don't know if everybody knows this or not, we, as a school committee, we do not vote on the grading policy. The superintendent's job is to inform us of the grading policy. Our policy just says that if changes are to be made, then we want a full extensive study done before making those changes. But ultimately, whether we waive this or not, we don't vote on the actual, whatever the grading policy is. So.
Thank you,
questions,
Amy.
again.
Diane, you have a question?
I think Angie was first.
I know what Angie's going to ask though, because Angie has some wording changes that she wants to make to the.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So let me just, I just want some clarification, Amy, on the phrase cooperative study, because I was just a bit confused by this, because you're waiving that. And then it says you're waiving the evaluation. That's basically the result of stakeholders getting together. And I'm wondering if that's what cooperative study is. But then you say that the temporary changes are going to be made with the same stakeholder groups coming together to give input. So can you just help me understand that a little better?
So typically what would happen in this case is you would have, it would go through probably an entire school year's worth of studies and small group meetings, the formation of a parents, teachers, probably students. So what we're saying is we don't have time for that. This is an unprecedented situation. And we don't have time to pull together all of the things that we would normally expect to do when making such a drastic kind of change that would be a long-term change. What we're asking for is a short-term change to say that we are going to waive that requirement of this extensive kinds of studies to get to the point where we can make a change if we want to, if we need to.
So are students going to be getting spring? Are there going to be like no parent? I would assume there's going to be no parent teacher conferences remotely. Is that what this is doing?
No, absolutely not. No, this has nothing to do. This is strictly this is the principal, the high school principal and Peter having being able to determine reading practices for this during this lockdown period. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think so. I think so.
So I can frame the discussion. You know, we're at a point where, you know, schools have closed and a vast number of students, you know, we've made it about 2/3 of the way through term 3. And, you know, then we have, you know, all of term 4, which is, you know, I think, you know, to be honest, looking pretty grim that we're going to get much of term 4 in at this point. You know, there's no change in a grading policy to term 4 right now by having students earn no grade or earn, you know, credit or no grade or something like that. Because the bottom line is we're not providing assessments. So there's just nothing to grade at this point. If we were to provide assessments, then we'd need to determine how we graded. However, we have to figure out how we're going to treat the third term. You know, and there's a number of different ideas that have been thrown out. There's been consideration of a pass-fail grade, and yet we've also received feedback from, you know, some of our students who have said that, you know, they may have struggled either first or second quarter, but then really had a pretty good third quarter, and feel like, if we don't give them some of that credit for the work that they did during third quarter, then they're kind of losing out on the progress that they made. And so what we're looking to do, we know we don't have time to put a committee together and then send the committee out to do a prolonged study of different grading systems and policies and things like that. However, what we want to do, and we're actually prepared to get sent out pretty quickly after this, is survey our students and survey our families, and survey our faculty around a couple of different options, either looking at kind of a pass-fail system, or looking at essentially what's a pass-fail system and giving some consideration for people, if students wanted to have a third grade term grade count toward their final, be able to give them some credit for that. There's no one right answer in all of this. I think that if you ask us, our personal preference, it's very clean to just go to a pass-fail system or credit no grade, something like that, that doesn't carry stigmas. But yet we're also really sensitive to allowing students who did work during third term that might help their end of the year grade to maybe have some consideration for that. So I think we're at the point we'd like to solicit some feedback around good opportunities. I think the one thing that, we noted in our parent forums last night is that when we report grades to colleges at the end of the year, the only thing that gets reported is a final grade. So colleges never have, or will they see, term 1, term 2, or term 3, or term 4 grades. It's just the average at the end of the year. So what we're really talking about is, do we want to go with a pass-fail system, or do we want to go with a system where some students might be able to help that end of the year average by including, a grade along the way during term 3 that might help them. So that's really, I think, the issue at hand. And if there's more to it, happy to have anyone jump in and clarify that. But
what are we waiving though? What is the cooperative study that goes on that we're waiving?
Well, that's really undefined as to what a cooperative study looks like. I think in many of our minds, when we hear something like a cooperative study, we would put a committee together that included representatives from our faculty, our students, our parents, and go out and study the issue at length. These are not times where it's very easy to navigate a committee process for something that's new, because those take time to do. And I think even if we were to get a committee going, there's so many other things happening right now with the closure that we would probably be extending that decision, beyond the end of the school year, which is just too long for kids to wait.
Okay, so you're just asking for an adjustment in the method that you would use to make a major change because of the contingencies that are upon us with COVID-19.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just being obtuse about it, but thanks.
No, that was good. Okay.
Angie, am I correct that your question is around the wording of the motion?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna have the other people ask their questions. I'm not forgetting about you. I saw that your hand
Okay,
was raised.
thank you.
Okay,
Go
Michael?
ahead. Yeah.
Michael?
Yes, I reviewed this. We were actually out. I was in the part of the policy subcommittee when we discussed this. So I want to make that clear that we only, the subcommittee only recommend with the first sentence of the last paragraph of that IKEB. But there's still a second sentence which says, who will share the proposal with the school committee. So just keep in mind that's a proposal. That's not the final one. It is shared with the school committee. But when I read this published statement, which replaced the original one that we try to waive. And it says that, such a change will be shared. So I have concern with that such change. Such change can be interpreted as a final change, can be interpreted as a final decision. It's not in line with or not consistent with what the last sentence of the last paragraph of IKEB. So I want that, the such change to be changed to, either such proposed change or such change proposal.
So I'm confused, Michael. So you're saying that you want it clarified that that the school committee will be informed in the proposed change before it's made a permanent change?
Right. Yes.
So we don't
Because-
vote on, but we don't.
Well, yeah. Wait. Well, I think the policy is not saying if we will vote or not, but the policy very clearly says that the proposal will be shared with school committee, not the final decision, not the final change. So that basically implies that the school committee can give a feedback, right? Can review and then give a feedback. So, but the current wording, which is inconsistent with what the policy that says, the part that we were going to retain.
So I don't see, I mean, whenever something comes before the school committee that isn't something that we vote on, then we get, basically it's an information. Here's what we're thinking of doing. Here's, the plan going forward. We're going to do this and this. I don't expect that. I'm just having a hard time with this distinction between the two. I don't think Peter's going to throw stuff out at us that is then he's just going to say, okay, but there's no comment on it. We're just going to move on. That's not how he operates. And he's already made clear that he's going to be sending out a survey to parents, teachers, and students. So there's your opportunity right there to, give input on as a parent. So.
Well, I think the waiver that we voted in the subcommittee was that to waive that, temporarily waive that first sentence, right? Which is, the methodology that we're going to use to collect the, the feedback or make the decision, right? So, but, that's only for the first sentence. But right now, if you look at this, the wording here, which is published right now, in the memo, that that not only just rewording that first sentence, but also is rewording the last sentence, which we didn't vote to change that last sentence, right? So that's kind of it's away from what we voted or what we discussed in the subcommittee. That's my understanding. So which I cannot agree. I cannot agree with.
All right, 1 second.
I don't think it's different.
No, if you read the last sentence of that wording compared to the last sentence of the paragraph, you will see the difference there.
So you want to add that instead of the proposed wording, such changes will be shared with the school committee and the public. You want to say such proposed changes will be shared with the school committee and the public.
Yes.
So
So that will give the school committee have a chance to review and then give the feedback, right? Because the superintendent and principal, they collect the feedback from the parents, students, and the staff, right? That's good. And then so where's the input and the feedback from the school committee, right? So the last sentence that the proposal or proposed change will give the school committee a chance to review and give the feedback.
Peter, do you want? I don't see. I mean, I don't see a problem with either way. Do you want to jump in on your thinking of how you were going to share this with the school committee and the public?
I would, I think, Larry and I would collect the feedback. I think what we're hearing from families is they prefer a decision sooner rather than later. But we're happy to defer any decision until, May 10th or something like that after the next school committee meeting.
But if voting on on a change that, on a grading policy change, whatever, is not our purview anyway, then what is the purpose in us waiting for that vote? Are we really arguing over the word proposed?
I would suggest that Peter, you include with
I know
your
that.
survey, that you also include the school committee so that they can respond as school committee members to, I guess, their thinking on it. And maybe that will take care of it. I agree. I don't think we should wait till the next school committee meeting for this to be shared publicly. It seems like that this needs to be done sooner than that.
Yeah,
I mean, we
the next-
also discussed that in the subcommittee pretty thoroughly. We already voted on that, so I don't know.
Adam had an additional question. Adam, can you ask? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question and a comment. The first sort of question comment is the first part of this proposal to waive the cooperative study. I think it would be better clarified if we said we were temporarily waiving the comparative study and evaluation, because in the language that we're seeing now, we're seeing sort of the first sentence or so says we're going to waive the cooperative study, and then we're going to say the temporary changes to the grading system. I would feel better if the language said that the part that we're waiving is also temporary.
But we did say that that we were waiving this only until June 30th, and then it would go back into effect. So that is part of the mission.
Yeah, I think it's just confusing to not have the temporarily waive at the beginning of the sentence and then get the waiver at the end. And then my other comment around Michael's language here is that in the original policy, it says the superintendent or designee will share the proposal with the school committee. And it's not make a proposal, but share the proposal with us. So I do agree that we could say such proposals will be shared with the school committee, but it doesn't necessarily imply that that proposal has to be evaluated or approved by the committee. Those are my two comments.
Paul, did you have something else on this? Your hand was raised too. And then Angie, I'll come to you and ask if I can't remember if the language you suggested is in line with what Michael suggested, but I'll come to you next. Paul?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to remind everyone that we're in a year that's an asterisk for a lot of things. I mean, whether we have the kids take MCAS or not, it's whatever the result, there's an asterisk next to it. I view it the same way here, is that no matter what we do, there's an asterisk next to it. The way I think I'd rather let it pan out is to let the teachers and the principal kind of come up with a process that is streamlined, and because they're going to put a lot of work. If we want them to put grades to this student or not, and not that one, it's a lot of work for them. And I feel like we're starting to get down into the operations, and I just don't think we belong there. So I think we just use this asterisk to give the teachers some latitude and the principals some latitude. So I'm happy with the way it is. Give the teacher and the principal latitude and let them do what they think is right.
Thanks, Paul. All right, Angie, did you want to share? I don't know how I know you had some proposed changes to the wording. I don't know how in line that is with what Michael suggested.
So I really appreciate, Peter, I appreciate that the survey that we'll be taking, because already that we heard a lot of community feedback on this subject. So my proposal is actually pretty much in line with what just has described, which is my proposal is in the original languages is after consideration of feedback. And my proposal is with due diligence of collecting feedback, which I think that the school district is taking the steps already. So my proposal is, because what I'm trying to make sure is just to see, because I think the district is working hard to getting feedback from the community and getting feedback from the staff and the student and the families. So we want to see the streamline of the process, and that will be stated, and everybody knows that, and that how the decision is made. So the proposal is that the first part is the same. The only changes is with due diligence of collecting feedback from parents, students, and staff. The feedback from parents, students, and staff will be shared with the school committee and the public. It's not decision, will be shared. Such change will be formed by the feedback collected and will be shared with the school committee and the public. The waiver will be in fact until June 2020. So I'm just trying to make it clear that in the process that we are the district is due diligence in collecting feedback and is also due diligence making the decision based on the feedback collected and share that with the public and the school committee.
Nora?
I guess I don't see the need to say that. I think it's already stated there that this is what will be done. I mean, so look, I think that, and people can jump in. I think that the way the subcommittee voted, and I'll let Nora and Jenny say something if they'd like to. The way the subcommittee voted was that we waive this and that we exactly what it says. That then Peter and Larry with the surveys, with all of the input from parents, teachers, and students, would then make the decision and then would inform us of the decision. I don't think that we should wait until the next school committee meeting. I think that they're just, students and parents are really concerned and they want to know what's going on. But if any other of the subcommittee people thought that differently, didn't understand it that way, then please say something.
Or go ahead and share.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this at length in the subcommittee meeting, and this is an emergency situation and a very brief sort of under this circumstance wave of only one aspect of it, which is an extended study. And I think one of the things also I would be concerned at not allowing changes to move forward in a timely manner, because that's in the best interest of the students and the parents, and not having, for Peter to have to wait and come back and inform us of something that we don't really have the right to vote on and hold that up for students so that we can do that just doesn't make sense to me. I think the idea of this waiver of this part of the policy is recognizing the situation that we're in and that things need to move forward in the best interest of students in an expedited way.
And I just want to remind everyone of the guidance that I shared at our last meeting from the MASC, which essentially said, stay in your lane. Like, there are things, this is one of those times more than ever when we really need to respect the superintendent's ability to have to make decisions quickly and in a timely fashion that serve our students and our community best. So if what we're arguing over here, this is a temporary waiver of a part of a policy so that Peter and Larry can make appropriate changes that they will inform us of going forward. And it isn't one of those situations where every single person gets to weigh in and that shapes the decision. I mean, the way that Peter's going to make a decision is by listening to the feedback. He already has. We went from, initially looking at the first letter that came out from Larry said that we were going to pass fail. And then the second letter from Larry said that we weren't. And then the third letter from Larry said that we're going to take some more time to consider this. So it's obviously a complicated decision. It's obviously something where they are taking into consideration the feelings of students and parents that are affected by this decision. And so, John, you haven't had a chance to speak. I will let you say your piece, and then I think we're gonna move on and take the vote. John?
A couple of things. One is I note that the suspension policy requires us to suspend, every additional meeting after this, so that I don't think that the language in this motion to extend the waiver to June 30th protects us from the need to actually revote this at every subsequent meeting we have until that time. So my suggestion to the policy subcommittee is that we change our suspension so that our suspension either lets it, go to every meeting or allows us to suspend for a time certain up to 3 months or 6 months or something like that. And then I think my personal view of this is we don't disagree with the substance of what people are trying to do here. I think there's some issues about the language of this motion. My particular niggle with this is that we're not changing the grading system because of COVID-19. We're changing the grading system because we've moved to a remote learning mode, which is different than our in-person mode. And I think the problem of crafting motions in meetings, is deeply rooted in problems with open meeting law. It's just inherent. But my view of this is that we do want to waive this. We want Peter and Larry to go out and collect some feedback, given all of the other constraints that are on them, roll that into a policy. And then, what I think should come back to the to the school committee is obviously we'll know what the policy is. The question is, well, why did you ultimately decide to do that? So we understand what the basis was for the decision. And that reporting out of the basis of the decision is all that's required. It's obviously not a voting activity.
Michael, do you have something additional to add to this, or are you just going to reiterate what you said before?
Well, I would say that, I would, agree with what John said, and also the Angie said about, because it's just a rewording. This is wording. It's not about, if we want to, delay this or not. But still, I want that, such proposal or such proposed change to be made there. Otherwise, I cannot support it.
Andrew?
I'm not delaying this. I'm just making a motion to change the word with due diligence of collecting feedback.
Okay. Okay, Adam?
I'd like to make the motion.
Okay, go right ahead.
So I move that in the student progress reports to parents, guardians policy IKAB, to waive the cooperative study and evaluation by teachers, principals, parents, and the superintendent or a designee, last paragraph. Temporary changes to the grading system related to the COVID-19 virus will be made by the principal and superintendent after consideration of feedback from parents, students, and staff. Such changes will be shared with the school committee and the public. The waiver shall be in effect until June 30th, 2020.
Second.
Okay. So now we need to do a roll call vote. Paul?
Yes.
Nora?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Angie?
Can I clarify? So if I want to do a due diligence, what do I do?
Due diligence. The motion, you can either reject or accept or abstain from the motion that was put forward and seconded.
Okay, so I abstain from this.
So Tessa, can she make a friendly amendment now, or does she have to wait until we vote on this?
No, you would make a friendly amendment first. So someone could make a friendly amendment to the motion just from a procedural
So
standpoint.
Can I do that now?
Sure.
So can I friendly make a amendment with instead of after consideration of feedback, and it changed to with due diligence of collecting feedback?
So how does it work now? Does someone have to
We need-
second that?
Someone needs a second.
So is there a
Second.
second? Is there a second? Michael, you seconded
Second.
that? Okay, so now how does that work?
We vote on the friendly amendment.
Okay,
So we vote on whether to amend the motion as stated.
okay. So Paul, are you need to vote on whether to accept the amendment?
No.
Nora?
No.
Adam?
I don't quite understand it, so I'm gonna have to vote no.
Amy?
No.
John?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Diane?
No.
Ginny?
No.
Me? No. Michael got up from his seat. Michael, you're voting
Yes.
on the amendment. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so does that, someone just help clarify for me, does that need to be unanimous? Because it was mostly no.
No, it's a majority vote.
Okay, so the friendly amendment does not pass. So now do we return to voting on the original amendment?
Can I make an amendment?
Sure.
Okay, so I want to make an amendment on the last sentence, which is right now it's a such change will be shared. So I want to make it to the such proposed change will be shared with school committee and the public.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So now we're voting on Michael's friendly amendment. Michael,
Yes.
Paul,
I see that language already in there, so I don't see the need for the amendment. So no.
Angie,
Yes.
John,
No.
Diane,
No.
Nora,
No.
Amy,
No.
Adam,
No.
Ginny,
No.
me, no. Okay, so that doesn't pass. All right, so now everyone has moved around on my screen. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go back and ask you to vote again on the original original motion that Adam proposed, because everyone's moved, so I lost track of who I called on. So Adam,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Paul,
This is the original.
the original, yes.
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Michael,
No.
Nora,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Ginny,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Did I leave anybody out? No. Okay. So,
Tessa, can I just make a point?
sure.
Because that was waiving the policy, it requires a 2/3 majority, which you do have with that. I just think you want to declare that it passed by more than 2/3.
I was going to, but thank you
I'm
for the
sorry,
reminder.
Tessa.
So there was 9 yes votes and 1 no vote. So that passes with more than 2/3 of the committee votes. Okay.
I'm sorry. Can I just add one thing,
Yep.
Tessa? Sorry. So what John brought up about having to revote each
Meeting.
school committee meeting, we have an end date saying that we're going to waive it until June the 30th. So I don't see the need to revote anything until after June 30th if we want to make another, we want to extend it or anything like that. And if that's it.
Okay. John, did you want to respond to that?
Well, since we have Ginny here as legal counsel, I'll let her opine on whether our suspension of policies, stands independent of whatever we did related to that suspension of policies.
I mean, the language is in there that it's through an end date. I don't see why that couldn't be effective.
All right. Ginny, you can be the last word. I'm not going to consider it any longer than that.
That's the last word.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so we did the next thing, which was, so the draft minutes of the meeting on 4/9 is included in your packet as an FYI. We did 4.5.
That's a
Yep.
Edco.
Edco update.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Okay.
No, that's okay.
No, I was going to. I was just turning the page. I didn't go past it. I was going to. Go ahead. Edco 4.6.
I just want to make sure we get to it because I think somehow, we had caught up to the time and now we've managed to go down over a little. In all seriousness, I had come back to the committee, I'm going to say a few meetings ago, maybe a couple months ago, and discussed some of the financial audit report from EDCO, where the auditors had some doubt as to EDCO's viability moving forward as an organization. And I wanted to provide a little bit of an update. We had a board meeting today, and some of this information just came to light yesterday and today in our packet for that. So I want to share with you a few things. Upon having learned of some of the concerns raised in the financial audit report, EDCO had hired a company called TMS, or the Management Solution, to perform financial management services for the collaborative. During their work, TMS uncovered that EDCO was operating in a significant deficit for FY20, and I don't have the exact number here tonight, just from a time standpoint, but I believe it was on the order of about $1 million deficit at that point for the fiscal year. The EDCO executive director then took some significant actions since that time to reduce the FY20 deficit, and they've gotten that down to between 175 and about 350,000. And I'll talk about that in a moment as to why there's a range there. But essentially, they took, they did mid-year personnel reductions. They have gone to some job share opportunities and reduced a lot of their employees to 0.4 during the closure, so that students are still receiving services, but people are working on a reduced schedule and reduced salary. The reason there's a range within the projection for the deficit is some of it is contingent upon additional information coming from DESE about the indirect costs of grants that EDCO can claim. And so until they receive that information from DESE, they wanted to provide both a low and a high range to what the deficit could be. So 350,000 is the high number of what the projected deficit could be for FY20. Cash flow for the organization right now is a challenge, and it is unclear if they're going to have sufficient cash on hand to pay all of their bills through the summer. EDCO has access to a line of credit, but that had been used to fund cash flow and does not have enough available funds to meet their short-term needs. And I'm qualifying short-term needs as through the summer at this point. The EDCO staff has proposed a plan to the board of directors to have each district fund an additional assessment to pay down both the line of credit and to close the FY20 deficit. The Acton-Boxborough share is somewhere on the order of $60,000. And the reason I'm saying somewhere on the order of is because there's a range to the FY20 deficit still. It's still too early to project that exact amount. The board deferred action on that today, but we are expected to take that up at a subsequent meeting. There is a process that we would need to follow in order to have that go through. And that's essentially that if there's going to be an additional assessment, the board would have to vote a budget amendment and then make each school committee aware of the decision. Based on the EDCO agreement, the board is actually the authority that votes that, and then it's our responsibility to make the committee aware that we had voted that. I wanted to make you aware of this prior because I think it's a significant enough issue that you need to be able to know what's happening with the organization and share any feedback that you might have. The proposal is going to be discussed again at a May board meeting. And then, if it was going to be finalized, we would have to do that in early June. The board all shared that this proposal is coming forward at a particularly challenging time for all of our districts. We're all in the same position. I think, we're fortunate in FY20 from a financial standpoint that we will realize some savings from the closure, but we're all looking at fairly, challenging outlooks for FY21. The EDCO attorney was also present at the board meeting today and advised us around the process for any potential dissolution of the collaborative and what any liabilities for the districts might look like. The opinion of the EDCO attorney was that should the collaborative dissolve, which, to be honest, is actually more than a year-long process to have that take place. But if the collaborative dissolved, that the liability actually remains with EDCO and not with the individual districts. And the attorney based that on experience with other collaboratives that have dissolved, but also some cases that she had been able to research. We had a DESE liaison there, as all collaboratives have DESE liaisons. The DESE liaison was cautious not to confirm the attorney's opinion, but wanted to do some additional research for us before we decided on next steps. I just want to let you know, I've also been discussing this with our attorney to make sure that we're protecting our own interests as a district as we work through the challenges with EDCO. It was clear that the board was not being asked for decisions today, the collaborative board, to be specific, but that the board needed additional information presented in order to determine the next steps for the collaborative. The next steps that I think personally I want to see are that the EDCO finance staff schedules meetings with all member districts' finance directors to help our finance directors also gain a deep understanding of the nature of the financial statements being presented and to determine a recommendation for any additional assessment. I did have Dave come to the meeting with me today, virtually, of course, so that he could, really start to dig into this. He and I have been communicating all along since we received the audit reports, and Dave and I went through those together. Developed a lot of the questions together to make sure that, the district's financial interests were represented along the way. So one, I think, our finance directors need to be involved in the process to make sure that they're understanding it and the implications of any additional assessment. We also need to hear back from DESE regarding what a dissolution process and determination would look like around any liability for districts. We need to see what an FY21 budget would look like to determine if the organization can be viable before making a decision about how to manage the FY20 deficit and the line of credit balance. And I'm going to certainly keep you informed as I know more in the coming weeks. I can answer some of the questions preliminarily today, but we don't have a lot of information. It's, a process that this was our first board meeting. We only meet once every probably around 2 months. And it's the first board meeting since closure. And I think, the collaborative had been on a pretty good course to remedying its financial status. And then the closure, if you really understand the EDCO collaborative, it's a collaborative that is primarily professional development, but then also has some really good specialized programs for students with disabilities. But all of their professional development for the spring had to be canceled because of the nature of the closure. And so they lost, almost all of their spring revenues coming in addition, because they're also grant funded. Some of those grants had to be put on pause because the work couldn't be completed. And so, for an organization that, had a difficult outlook and a challenging outlook, but could see the light at the end of the tunnel, the closure has provided some really, really difficult challenges for that organization that they're trying to work through, which is why they're coming forward with this proposal to have districts and all the member districts each look at contributing a share. I will say that since we received that audit report, the executive director has worked tirelessly to try and take all of the recommended actions. She's a relatively new executive director to the organization. This is only her second year with the organization. And a lot of the information coming out in this was very new. And in some of the financial causes, seem to date back, multiple years beyond what the current executive director would have known about. So, I think there's a lot of benefit to the EDCO organization. It's actually one of the oldest collaboratives in the entire state. They were scheduled to celebrate the 50th anniversary. They had a large celebration at the State House scheduled for December of this year. And then upon receiving the audit report and looking at the financial outlook, they decided to cancel that. And it's been a really difficult road for everyone in that organization since. I don't have any answers for you, and there's no recommended actions tonight, but it's more of an update and an opportunity for you to hear kind of what's going on with that organization and where things stand right now. So I'm happy to, take any comments, questions, things like that. I'm actually going to promote Dave again, in case there's, more general financial questions that you might have along the way. There he is. He promoted himself.
Diane, your hand was up first.
I just want to say how sad this is. EDCO has provided school committee members with professional development that's sorely needed. I was very sad to hear what's going on there. Two quick questions. Why couldn't they just kind of go remote with their professional learning? And then I'm assuming they're going to report on the long-term viability of EDCO before we're asked to, like, fork up even $60,000.
Yeah, that's, we are looking at similar things as a board. I don't have a really clear answer for you on each of the different professional development offerings. I think there are some offerings that they've tried to maintain in an online environment. But I actually, so I think there's some revenue maybe still in that regard. But, and I don't think I mentioned it before, but they actually rent their facility for quite a bit of revenue for other types of professional development options that happen at the EDCO facility, but they're other organizations renting space from EDCO. So when I said professional development, I think it's probably a combination of the two.
Paul?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Diane was saying. There were a lot of good things coming out of EDCO. It's sorry to see that they're suffering like this.
Don't see any additional hands. So thank you for the update, Peter. So the next thing on our agenda is the superintendent evaluation process. We need to start talking about this. So Peter, will you let me share my screen? And I'll
let you share your screen. You already can share your screen.
I already can share my screen. Excellent.
You can.
Wait a minute. Choose what you'd like to share.
Or the technology will allow you to share your screen.
The technology will allow me to share my screen. Fantastic. I think I do it this way. No. Yes. Can you see that?
You can.
All right. Okay. So I will try and do justice to this. Diane set the bar really high last year when she was able to share with us all of the ins and outs of the superintendent evaluation. And as a relatively new member of being able to participate in this last year, I found it to be one of the hardest, scariest, most overwhelming things that we're asked to do. The superintendent evaluation, as it's given to us, is a pretty comprehensive form. And there are some slides here that Peter happily included to help get us through understanding what this is. So just to give you a general overview, at this meeting tonight, I don't think that the documents for the summative evaluation were included in the packet, but we will get those out to you. But so tonight is really just to kind of understand what the process was before we were out of school, what the process might look like a little bit different now, and other things we may consider. Most of it doesn't change, but just helping you understand how these changes might affect the way we do the evaluation. At the May 20th meeting, which is 2 meetings from now, Peter's going to give us a final report on the status of the current year's goals as written. And I will issue a general public request for input. So when we get to some of the next slides, we're going to talk about the status of the current year's goals versus what's been going on now. June 5th will be the due date for you all to submit your completed written evaluations to me. And I will take all of the public input, and I will write a summative, a composite evaluation that would then be included in an addendum for the June 18th school committee meeting, presented at the meeting, discussed and voted. So MASC has put out some guidance for us around what happens to the evaluation of the superintendent this year. And their guidance is generally that goals could be evaluated on the progress expected up until the mid-March closures. Committees and superintendents should discuss whether the goal was on track for completion. So that's something that at our May 20th meeting, when Peter shares his update, we can certainly discuss whether goals were on track for completion, whether there's still work to be done. And we could agree at that meeting that that a goal that was on track to be met by the end of the evaluation cycle could be labeled as significant progress and would have the same weight as met in the final rating, given what has happened. So just to give you an example here, Peter generously put in his goals so that we could so that those of you who have never seen the summative evaluation could understand what we're talking about. So the student learning goal, the description: by June 2020, we will develop a pre-K through 6 literacy, reading, vision, and implementation plan that will provide equitable access to evidence-based instructional and assessment practices that improve literacy outcomes for all students. So at our next, at the May 20th meeting, Peter would present how far we've made it in that goal. And so we can decide that if it's a goal that would have been on track to be met, we can mark it significant progress and consider it as though he had done the amount of work required to have a goal that was met, but then COVID-19 happened. So just to give you an idea of what his goals, just a reminder of what his goals looked like and how we may start to consider those things. Peter, did you want to add anything to this before I go to the next slide?
No, I don't think so. We just wanted to put the goals in to remind you of what they were and kind of general targets.
Okay. And they continue on this page, but you can see that what you will be asked to mark in the rubric is did not meet, some progress, significant progress, met, or exceeded. As far as the standards, the standing advice from MASC has been that superintendents need not produce different pieces of evidence for the goals and for the agreed upon standards and indicators. However, the focus of districts has changed so drastically that there may be value in reconsidering. So there may be a case for including in the evaluation evidence about how the issues relating to the closures were handled. And evidence of this critical and unexpected work could be included for the ratings on the standards. However, you need to remember that this is an evidence-based model. So ratings and narratives about the superintendent's performance should be supported by evidence. And at either the next meeting or the May 20th meeting, we can talk more about what examples of evidence are after you've had a chance to look at what the evaluation actually looks like, those of you who have not seen it before. And we can talk about what sorts of evidence. And my recollection is that last year, Peter provided us with quite a bit of evidence to help us in writing the evaluation at the end. And I imagine, Peter, I don't mean to give you too much pressure, but I imagine you would do the same this time.
Correct.
So the ratings are broken down into like within a standard of instructional leadership: curriculum, instruction, assessment, evaluation, data-informed decision-making, student learning, and then overall. So one of the things I struggled with as a new member and looking at this as someone who had never done it before is there are things within each of these standards that we may not necessarily see as school committee members. And so the guidance really is to focus on the things that we do see and to start from a place of proficient and then make decisions in one direction or the other in terms of understanding where we need to go with ratings. I don't think I said that quite as eloquently as you and I talked about earlier today, Peter, but.
No, that's okay. I think, if you don't mind, I just offer, some advice, and I come at this from having used this, hundreds of times with educators. And, what I've found is that when I start to look at the rubric, the first thing I try to look at is the actual language of the standard. So in what the language used to describe the standard is. So if you look at the bottom where it says overall rating for instructional leadership, and they put it at the bottom because it's designed to help you walk through a process to get there. But there's language that says the education leader promotes the learning and growth of all students and the success of all staff by cultivating a shared vision that makes powerful teaching and learning the central focus of schooling. That's ultimately the broad language that you're trying to get to. And the reason DESE created the rubrics was then to break down in the best way possible and provide guidance to you about what some of the elements of that might be. So there's language around, now you look back up at the top, 1A curriculum, 1B instruction, assessment, evaluation, data-informed decision, and student learning. All of those are ultimately in service to that overall rating and the overall standard. So my most successful evaluations that I've done have been when I've started by thinking about the standard itself and the language around that, and then going into more of the detail afterward around the ratings, and then using those ratings to help check my overall thinking around the standard. And again, you can approach it really any way you want, but that's where I've felt most comfortable in the long run.
Thanks, Peter.
Sure.
So then within the rubric, it'll give you an understanding of what each category means. What does unsatisfactory mean? What does needs improvement mean? What does proficient and exemplary mean? And so as you're collecting evidence, and as Peter stated, kind of starting from proficient and either subtracting or adding based on evidence that we've collected, you can start to understand where the guidelines are for each rating.
Yeah, can I just add one thing to that too?
Yep.
In the previous slide, you got a sense of what the overall evaluation form looks like. Now this slide is actually comparing the evaluation form with language of the rubric. And so, my recommendation would be that over the next few weeks, before you get evidence, this is your opportunity to take a look at what the language of the rubric is for all of the different performance levels. And you don't have to memorize it. It's not a pop quiz at the end or anything like that. I think the easiest place to start is looking at what proficient looks like. So if I'm looking at that indicator 1B and I'm thinking about it, all right, what does proficient look like for that? And then I might say, okay, if that's not it, what would needs improvement look like, or what would exemplary look like? But I always try to ground myself in proficiency first, because it's the benchmark for the standard, really. So again, just as a way, if you don't start with something manageable, these rubrics become so overwhelming because there's like 40 something elements on the rubrics. I don't have it memorized. Wouldn't expect anyone would, but I think grounding in proficient makes the easiest path through all of it.
Yeah. And so just a reminder that this is just one step in a 5-step cycle. So the disruption to students and staff and to the best laid plans can't be overstated. We're going to have to start to consider goals for the next evaluation cycle, and there likely will be new priorities to address. So there will be, I am certain, things left over from goals that were started this year that maybe there wasn't as much, we hadn't planned on as much needing to be addressed in future years, but maybe there will be more now. And there may be additional goals that may have seemed unimaginable a year ago, but may be reasonable, important to include in the next evaluation cycle. So just to remember that the vision and the mission of the district does not change. Some things might take a back seat for a while. Some things might move ahead in line, but the overall district strategy should remain in place. And I do say that recognizing the district strategy was one of Peter's goals this year, but focusing on doing the short term well will enable the district to return to the long-term work more quickly and with better success. So that, I don't think you need to see the slides for me to continue. So this is really just a broad overview of what we have in front of us, and to let you know that you will receive a copy of what a blank evaluation looks like, so that you can start to familiarize yourself with what kinds of things are being evaluated, and to start to consider, and that can be part of our discussion, when Peter presents what he has accomplished thus far in the school year. We can start to consider all of the other things, how Peter's handled communication with families during this crisis, how he has been an educational leader, and things like that. So like I said, just an overview of what is to come, and preview. So Diane, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'll be really quick. So Tessa, does school committee get to decide like if we're going to be evaluating on the closure? I mean, I would love to, I'm sure everyone would, but is that a collective decision that we make? And can we wait or eliminate or prioritize any one of those indicators under the standards? Do we have to do every single one?
So
Peter, you wanna answer?
my thought was when I present some evidence, I would actually help you align some of the goals that I've presented evidence to or will present evidence with specific indicators to help you kind of find a path through that. There may be some additional indicators, and Tessa and I can talk about that from a closure standpoint that may be relevant in all of this. I think that we tried to do that last year and narrow the focus because if you try to come up with, multiple pieces of evidence for 42 different indicators, it's a hopeless venture. There's no way any superintendent would be able to provide it, and certainly not at this period, but we can certainly help narrow it a little bit for you.
Yeah, that was really, really helpful last year, I have to say.
It was, and the MASC guidance has really left it up to committees and superintendents to make a decision around what should be included as part of the evaluation and what shouldn't, and how the closure has affected everything, going forward. And I agree with you that I think that there will be ample evidence of things that Peter has done throughout the closure that would be valuable to include in an evaluation.
And I would fully expect that as well. I remember I said to someone earlier in my career, if you don't want to be judged on your best day and you don't want to be judged on your worst day, you better make sure your average is good enough, kind of a thing. There's good and bad times in any year, and things are up and down, and you're going to do things well. You're going to have some things you want to get better at, but you can't just discount whole swaths of things because there's challenging times.
Sure. John?
Well, it seems obvious that we should grade these, last 3 months on pass-fail basis.
Yeah.
But seriously, I mean, my simplistic view of awaiting would be that if we say that there's 3 months of this new normal, that's sort of a quarter of what happened. In some ways, it would be fortunate if the goals that you had, you were able to successfully carry through the new normal remote learning environment. But obviously, there are other things that are important. So, I think, simplistically, 3/4 of the review still feels like the normal part of the year, just like it did for the students, and a quarter of the review is something else.
Well stated, John. Does anyone else have additional questions?
I have a,
Yeah,
I-
go ahead.
yeah. So maybe I missed it. So I remember we talked about the workshop. So that is definitely will be delayed and will be coming back because that's kind of part of the process, right?
The workshop that we would have had in March, you mean, with Tony Bent?
Yes.
That was really more about working on ourselves as a committee. Peter was definitely a part of that, and he was going to share some of the district strategy at that workshop, but it wasn't as much about the process of evaluating him. So I think that the work that should have occurred right when we were getting out of school. And so, I mean, I believe that was the Monday after we stopped attending. So, I think that Peter will share the process of the district strategy and what's been completed and what hasn't at the May 20th meeting when he shares his general progress and his goals. That was sort of going to be a preview.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else, or can we move on? All right, we're going to move on. Subcommittee and member reports are Item 5.3, so school building committee update.
So school building committee, continues to be on schedule. That's some good news in all of this, is the project continues to be on schedule. We are in the process of getting ready to submit our design development documents to DESI, to MSBA for another round of review. And one of the critical steps in that process is to get another round of cost estimation into the project. So all the concurrent documents based on the design to date have been submitted to independent cost estimators. And that work is scheduled to be done next Tuesday. And we have a staff meeting with them at the end of the day on Tuesday to get a sense of where we stand with cost estimates. That then triggers, additional look at the design, and there maybe have to be some value engineering that goes on with the design. There may not be, we just don't know. But that's really where we stand. Simultaneously, we have been working on modulars. We thought we had fantastic news on the prices of the modulars, and we were all very, very excited at the building committee level because we thought that the bid to purchase some used modulars might only be about $300,000, but it turns out there was an error in that bid, and it's still probably closer to what we had budgeted and originally thought, which is around $1 million. So unfortunately, it was just an error that got us excited, but that does happen. But we are in the process of negotiating with that vendor to see if we can get the price down. So modulars continue to be on track. The last component is the architect and engineers are preparing what's called an early bid package. And that is essentially for the early site work, including the septic field, to be installed over the course of the summer. They do that as an early bid package because the overall construction documents aren't completed until early next fall. But they do an early bid package to get all of the early site work done ahead of the construction documents being done. So that's in process. And again, it's all that everything is part of the master plan. Nothing has changed to date. I just wanted to give you that update as to where we stand, but we're still in a favorable position. It was really interesting to look at the bond market too, in retrospect. It really is just good fortune, but the bond market leading up, we talk about like different shaped economic curves. I heard a lot of that the other day about V, U, and L-shaped curves for the economy. But the bond market has been a V-shaped bond market with interest rates, and we hit it just about at that point of the lowest historic interest rates ever. So we're really fortunate, but almost immediately after to the day, bond interest rates jumped way up again. So it's a really volatile market right now, but we were very fortunate where we came out. So that's some good news as well for the district.
Angie, did you have a question?
Yes. Can Dave, this is a financial question. So can someone remind me what interest that we are collecting for the $82 million that's sitting in the bank now?
The actual rate?
No. It just, are we collecting interest or are we buying bonds or what? Can you remind me what we do with the money now?
It's on deposit with a statewide organization called Mass Municipal Depository Trust. They have billions of dollars. Most cities and towns by default put their investable cash with them. The last time we looked, we were earning 1.1%.
Okay.
Okay. The next thing we need to do is we need to recommend to authorize the superintendent to submit to the MSBA the statement of interest for the Conant School. There's specific motion language or a form of vote included on page 32 of your packet. This is just what we do every year, that we submit the statement of interest for Conant.
And if you have questions, JD is, sitting in the audience in the admin building waiting, and I can promote him.
Angie, are you still raising your hand? No. Okay. No. So does someone want to make a motion? Adam?
All right. This is my important job of the night. I move that having convened in an open meeting on April 16th, 2020, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee of Acton and Boxborough, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit the Massachusetts School Building Authority the Statement of Interest form dated February 3rd, 2020, for the Luther Conant Elementary School located at 80 Taylor Road, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Priority 2, elimination of severe overcrowding. Priority 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems, such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating, and ventilation systems, to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in the school facility. And priority 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the regional school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Second.
All right, so we'll do a roll call vote. Paul,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nora,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
Han,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay, that passes unanimously. The minutes from the meeting on March 25th are in your packet as an FYI. All right, the Boxborough Leadership Forum met on Tuesday night. I don't know. I think I may be fried at this point to report on what was decided. All of us from Boxborough were there. Does anyone have high level? The town meeting is scheduled to be on June 15th, I believe. There was a lot of discussion around where to hold the town meeting to be able to maintain social distancing. There's some thought to holding it at the Regency. The vote will be June 2nd. Boxborough is also encouraging people to do absentee voting to reduce the number of poll workers needed, and they may also be looking at a different space for voting, as the area where we usually vote has sort of one entrance in and one entrance out, and so they're looking at some alternatives that may depend on whether or not we go back to school, because Blanchard might be one of them.
The FinCom presented on a number of financial models that they were looking at and cost reductions that were then also being looked at by the select board and the town administrator in terms of ways to trim the budget.
There were some questions for us about whether or not the school budget was going to show any reductions or not. I think there was some hope about that.
Whether or not we'd be using E&D to reduce the assessment too.
Also, I think there was some interest in summer school, which Tessa answered questions about that and shared information, Peter, that you shared with the committee last time. And people were happy to hear about the meals that are being provided for students and that technology is being provided for students. So there was some discussion about that too.
I think that pretty much summarized it. Diane, is there any additional things you want to share from budget?
From budget? Yeah. So, I mean, I've been going to all kinds of meetings. I remotely attended the Board of Selectmen meeting at Acton and the FinCom meeting. And so there's a hiring freeze in Acton. They're not filling job vacancies right now. They're waiting on hiring seasonal workers. I guess Dave is speaking at the next Finance Committee meeting next Tuesday, I think. And they're seeing a reduction in Acton and meals tax, excise tax. No one's buying cars. It's all expected stuff, but they're on target financially for the quarter ending 3/31. So the budget subcommittee met, gosh, so Tuesday, I don't know.
Tuesday.
All the days are blending together at this point. I know it's late. So at the last meeting, recommendation that we provide guidance to the administration on our preferred strategies to bring all-day K revolving fund to a positive status at a future meeting. And we were told at that meeting, Dave did it, if you remember, Dave Berlino did a kind of an audit of our revolving funds, that there was a projected deficit should we remain closed to the tune of about $260,000, almost $261,000 for FY21 in the all-day K revolving fund. So the recommendation of the administration and of the budget subcommittee would be to delay the vote on that action right now. And so this is, and you'll, Marie and up here, you can jump in if I'm getting this wrong, but the district leadership has suggested that there is a way to apply circuit breaker funds to offset a portion of that deficit, about $193,000 of it, should the state of emergency be extended. So the 193 is the amount of all-day K tuition that is charged to the operating budget for students on IEPs that are in all-day K. And if the school committee approves, we can recommend or approve that they move this amount, the 193, out of the operating budget into the student services line item in our budget. And that would make those funds available for an offset through the circuit breaker, which is restricted in its use to special education. And just so you know, Jay Sullivan, who's basically the Dave of DESE, has recommended that districts do whatever it takes to get your revolving accounts out of the red. So this would be in line with that guidance. So I don't think it requires a vote, but we did spend a good bit of time discussing that. Since it's a line item change, it does fall kind of within our purview to be very aware of it and to approve it. And again, I don't think that there's a vote required, but it's a major, any kind of line item change has to be brought to our attention. So I'll just stop there and see if anyone has any questions. Amy, I think your hand is up, so I wasn't sure if you had a question.
Amy, were you raising your hand for that or because of what you told me you need to do? Amy, did you have a question about that or because you wanted to update us on the other thing?
I just wanted to update you on the other one. Thanks.
Okay. Does anyone have a question with regards to what Diane shared?
Okay.
Okay.
And the leadership also shared with us that given the current economic conditions, we can expect a surge of waiver requests for next year for all-day K. So just keep that in mind. That revolving fund is not in good shape right now. So we need to figure out what to do. And I think this is a really, really great step in the direction of doing that. The other thing, yeah.
I appreciate your use of the word surge in a non-medical context.
The other thing that we had briefly discussed was, should we refund pre-K tuition? And the recommendation was to wait. Some of the districts, I guess, are collecting 50% of their tuition through June, and we're not collecting any tuition at this point. So I guess if the state of emergency is extended, the thinking is we're going to have to generate about $226,000 in refunds. So the recommendation from leadership was to wait and have Joe do a little bit of research and come back to us with a recommendation either through budget sub or directly to the school committee.
Marie.
Just a quick, you did a great job, Diane. That was a lot of complicated stuff. The 226,000 refunds would be related to all-day K, not pre-K.
Oh, okay.
Pre-K is a much smaller number. The most would be talking about a pre-K is 19,000, some of which hasn't been paid yet.
Okay, thank you for that correction.
Thanks.
That's it for a budget sub.
Crawling in the walls of the room where I am, so it's distracting me. Okay, Amy, did you want to, John, I know you need to update us on HIT. Amy, did you want to update on negotiations?
Yeah, on negotiations. So the negotiating subcommittee has been meeting with AFSCME and OSA, and we expect to come to you in May, probably the beginning of May, with more information. That's all.
Okay.
A proposal.
Sorry, what?
Come to you in the beginning of May with a proposal.
Great. Paul, did you have a question about that?
Would that be an executive session?
Yeah, the first sharing definitely would, right? In executive session, like we always do. Yes.
John, did you want to update us on HIT?
Thank you. Last week, acting as chair on behalf of the Acton Health Insurance Trust, I instructed our insurance administrators, Blue Cross Blue Shield and Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, that the Acton Health Insurance Trust will cover any healthcare costs members might incur associated with COVID-19, including deductibles and copays. The nature of this incremental coverage will vary by plan. The standard deductibles, $250 a person, and hospital copays of $300 or $200, and for the HSA plan, the deductible of $2,000 to the extent that deductibles have not already been met. I took this action for several reasons. First, this action will support members actively seeking appropriate guidance and treatment for COVID-19. The action is in harmony with decisions being made at local, state, and national levels, which require a coordinated response among disparate actors to blunt the economic impact of the pandemic. Second, since the action improves on the standard benefits by reducing member costs, no consultation with members was required. Third, the fiduciary responsibility of the trust is satisfied as the various incremental cost deductibles will not materially change the expenses of the trust. And fourth, this approach respects the alignment of the benefits independent of our insurance administrator.
Thanks, John. Okay, were there any other subcommittee or liaison reports that I missed? Anybody else that needed to share? Super. All right. We have statement of warrants next, and I think that's the last thing. So, Dave, did you have a memo that you want to review for us? You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
I think you got it, correct?
In the packet?
I think so, but if you want to let me share the screen, I can call it up.
I think it's in the packet, Dave.
It is in the packet.
So I'm just reading what's written in my chair notes.
Maybe you could just give a quick highlight of why we're looking to vote the warrants instead of traditional approach.
Tessa or me?
You.
Me, okay. What you would normally have in front of you and be passing around all night are hard copies of the warrants. The checks have already been released. That authority is given by virtue of a majority of the budgets warrant subcommittee. That's already been done for all of the ones that you see tonight. What is required is for formal authorization for the disbursement to have been made by the school committee. So typically you do that by signing the hard copies. The hard copies aren't there because we're not together, obviously. Instead of when we return, you facing a mountain of paper and having writer's cramp from having to sign all of those warrants at that time, which would be required to authorize the disbursements, we're asking for you to take a vote, a recorded vote, and a vote is the same as, I should say, the signatures, all of your signatures are tantamount to a vote. So some districts do this anyway and take a vote to approve warrants. We're asking you to do that tonight. And so the packet contains the details of I believe there are 6 warrants for you to approve tonight.
So I will read the names, numbers of the warrants, and the amounts, and then I'll ask for a motion at the end. Yes, Adam?
So the packet doesn't include the individual details of all the expenses, which is what we usually review prior to signing the warrants. So Dave wants to make a comment about that.
Yeah, I apologize. I should have mentioned that because it's key that, and this is in my memo. I'm going to call up my memo just to make sure the warrant subcommittee has previously reviewed the warrants for the purpose of writing and printing and distributing the checks. The full school committee has received electronically the declining balance register of payments. You usually get that anyway, and the warrant detail, you got that electronically. That's usually what's in front of you in hard copy. And for the 2 payroll warrants, you got those electronically versus in hard copy. So you're getting all of the information that you would normally get if we were in live session.
Adam, they were posted. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm echoing. They were posted in the addendum. I don't know if they're posted separately now or.
Yeah, they're not in the rolled up addendum that I downloaded this evening.
I think they were there and now they're gone. So I think we just had a little snafu when we merged everything. So because I did go through all of them earlier and I can't find them now. So
There were 200
disappeared.
pages.
And we're going to be sending those to you directly as we move forward.
So my question is, do members have them or have had a chance to look at them? No.
I got a
would
question, if I may. Are these the warrants that we've the warrant signing subcommittee has already authorized?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, but I would suggest if certainly it looks like not enough, or certainly several members have not had a chance to look at them. This is fine. You're going to have another virtual meeting. We'll tee it up and take care of it then.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's fine with me. And so Peter indicated that they'll be sent to us individually rather than posted in the packet, right, Peter?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So was there anything under FYI that you needed to mention, Peter, or are we good?
Nope.
All right. Our next meeting is May 7th at 7 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? John?
Yes.
Angie? Angie?
Yes.
Maura?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And me? Yes. All right. So we are adjourned. I think I called everybody, right? Yes. All right.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Good night.
Peter, I have a quick question.
Okay, we can connect after.